Hi guys, welcome to Tpull's Corner. This is Travis. This week we are playing Travis Plays the Premades, and our deck is Growing Hunger. It's one of the 10 premade decks that Wizards of the Coast gave us. They put it together. There's only 17 creatures in it and 24 lands, so that's a couple creatures less than usual, but I think they're counting on the fact that the instants and sorceries and a couple of enchantments will help make up for that. There's no artifacts. Okay, so 3 of them are Feigned Death, which kind of puts you back up to 20 creatures right at the end, because until the end of the turn, target creature gets returned to the battlefield, tapped under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. And it melds nicely with the rest of the deck because it's adding a +1/+1 counter, and that's kind of the theme of the deck. Growing Hunger means growing counters. We have 1 Ochre Jelly. It enters the battle with X +1/+1 counters, and when it dies, if it had 2 or more, you create a copy of the token, or actually create a token that's a copy of it at the beginning of the next end step. So if you cast it for 1 green and 4 X, it's a 4/4 creature. If it dies, the token that comes back is 2/2, and so on and so on. You only get the token back once, but it's a pretty powerful creature. 3 Power Word Kills. Again, non-angel, non-demon, non-devil, non-dragon, so if you're up against angels and dragons and demons and stuff, it's not going to work. Big play, you pump up the creature +2/+2, and it gains reach until it ends of turns. Then on top of that, you get to put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it's kind of sort of like a giant growth with a bonus on top of it. So they give you a temporary end of turn gain, and they give you a counter. Dragon's Guard Elite. This is another reason why they give you a few creatures and they give you more spells, because Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, you get to put a counter on the Dragon's Guard Elite. What else do we want to say about this? Well, you have the other counter. I don't have occasion to use this ability quite as much, but you can pay 6 mana and double the number of +1/+1 counters on the Dragon's Guard Elite. Now that's a permanent increase of the counters. Keep that in mind. Emergent Sequence. You search your library for a basic land card, and that land becomes a blue and green fractal card. You put a +1 counter on it for each land you had enter the battlefield under your control this turn. The problem with that is, except for Binding the Old Gods, there isn't a whole lot else here that I see that puts lands into play. So you're going to basically get a 2/2, maybe a 3/3 at most token creature, but it's a way to ramp. You have 1 copy of Ranger Class to give you the wolf at the beginning, and then when you boost it up to level 2 for 2 mana, you can, whenever you attack, you put a counter on a target attacking creature. And then at level 3, you look at the top of your card of your library, and you can cast creature spells from the top of the library. Moss Pit Skeleton, you can bring down for just 2. A lot of people do in the early parts, but later on, you tend to get it back. If Moss Pit Skeleton was kicked for the total 5 mana, you get 3 counters on it, so it's a 5/5 creature. If it's dead, whenever 1 or more +1 counters are put on a creature you control, if Moss Pit Skeleton is in your graveyard, you can put him on top of your library. And so again, we only have 17 creatures, right? But if you say Feigned Death gives us 20, if they don't have Exile on these guys, you have more than 20 creatures, because you can just bring them back each time. Hagrid Constrictor. Enters the battlefield with 2 +1 counters on it, and then every creature you control with a counter on it has Menace. That can be cool. 2 poison the counters for removal, which is better than Power Word Kill, because you've got the Foretell ability and you've got the ability to scry. Orenri's Oof, another ooze creature. You put a +1 counter on any target creature you control when it enters the battlefield, which means you can put it on the ooze itself. Whenever the ooze attacks, you put a +1 counter on each and every attacking creature that already has a +1 counter on it. So again, counters, more counters, synergy with counters, complementing counters, all that stuff. I like this one. Grakmaw Skyclave Ravager, a legendary Hydra horror. He enters battle with 3+3 counters on it, or sorry, 3+1/+1 counters on it. When another creature you control dies, if it had a +1 counter on it, you get to add another counter to Grakmaw. When Grakmaw dies, you create a black and green Hydra creature token, which you see pictured to the right there. It looks kind of gruesome, birthing itself. Where X is the number of +1 counters on Grakmaw. So, worst case, you kill this and it comes back as a 3/3 token, right? Better case, if you manage to have other creatures die along the way and it becomes a 4/4 or a 5/5, the token comes back as a 4/4 or a 5/5. Skyclave Shadowcat, 1 copy of a cat horror. For 2 mana, you can sacrifice another creature and put a counter on the Shadowcat. Or whenever a creature you control with a +1 counter on it dies, you draw a card. Lidjar Glade Warden, a changeling. For 3, you can tap it and exile a creature from your graveyard and put 2 counters on a target creature. However, you can only attach it or only use it as a sorcery. 3 copies of Struggle for Skemfar. This is your creature fight spell. You can foretell it, and if you do that, it only costs 1 mana instead of 4. But you put a +1 counter on a target creature, and that creature fights up to another target creature. 2 copies of Master Symmetrist, a Rhino Druid. I never thought I'd live to see the day to see a Rhino Druid, actually. He has reach 4/4. Whenever a creature you control with power equal to its toughness attacks, it gains trample until end of turn. If all of your counters are adding 1/1 only, then you can basically have all of your creatures have trample. Most people are familiar with Binding the Old Gods. You destroy a target non-land permanent, then you get to search your library for a forest card. It comes into the battlefield tapped, and then every creature that you have gains Death Touch after that. Tenured Inkcaster, 3 copies of a Vampire Warlock here, 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, you put a +1 counter on a target creature, and then whenever a creature you control with a +1 counter on it attacks, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So I think you should be picking up on the pattern by now. If your enemy doesn't have removal and you manage to get 3 or 4 of these complementary counter creatures together on the field of battle at one time, the results can be devastating the way that they'll interlink with each other. And finally, the Piece de Resistance, Vorinclex, Monstrous Raider. Most people, I think, have seen him at least once, if not been killed by him 20, 30 times. 6/6 Trampler with haste, and if you put 1 or more counters on permanent or player, you put twice as many on instead. So once he's out, suddenly everything that has a counter effect gets doubled. And of course, your entire deck is pretty much based on counters, right? If the opponent tries to put a counter on it, they put half that many of those counters on the permanent or player instead, rounded down. Now, the cool thing that can kind of shut down other things is the way that the enchantment sagas work is you put a lore counter on them. If the Vorinclex is out and your enemy puts out an enchantment saga, the enchantment saga just sits there not doing anything because the lore counter is a counter. It gets cut down to 1/2 and then is rounded down to 0, and it never goes anywhere. So basically you put the enchantment down and it stays there with 0 counters on it, so it can't even do the first one. So Binding the Old Gods cannot touch Vorinclex. Alright, that's the deck. We're going to spend the week playing 1 match a day, talking about the advantages, the disadvantages, seeing how much we win, seeing what we like and don't like about the deck. And then the final day, we'll also add in a little deck tech at the end and talk about if there's anything that we might change to this pre-made deck if you want to try and upgrade it. Alright, remember, like and subscribe, folks, and I'll see you at the next video. Thanks. Have a good one.